You see a listing online, a house for $5,000 in the United States. You might think it's a scam or an economic anomaly, but this is not an economics video. That number, that price, it is not a data point. It is a gravestone. The price of a home is the market's final verdict on its history, and the cheapest towns in America are not cheap. They are haunted, not by ghosts necessarily, but by history, by tragedy, by bad decisions, by unsolved murders and dreams that died violent deaths. Today we are not browsing Zillow. We are opening forgotten archives. We will investigate 10 towns and the real story of what happened, the story that forced everyone to leave. The price tag is just the final chapter. We are here to read the first. We will begin with the great visible scars left on American society, and then descend into the personal, buried mysteries that stain the land itself. Number 10. Detroit, Michigan. Homes that sell for less than a used car. Entire city blocks available for pennies on the dollar. To understand the price, you must first understand the dream that died. This was the arsenal of democracy. This was the home of the Fordist Dream, a promise that one man with one factory job could support an entire family, buy a home, and build a life. It was the American dream, mechanized and mass-produced. And then came July 1967, the 12th Street riot. It was not a riot, it was an uprising. 5 days of fire, confusion, and suppressed rage that left 43 people dead and thousands of buildings burned to the ground. It was a scar from which the city would never recover. The riot triggered the White Flight, one of the largest mass exoduses in modern history. The middle class and the tax base they represented evaporated. They left behind a skeleton of infrastructure, a city designed for 2 million people, with less than 700,000 left to pay for it. The $10,000 homes you see today are not a bargain. They are artifacts. They are monuments to a fallen empire and the dream that burned down in a single summer. Number 9. Flint, Michigan. Homes famously listed for less than the car parked in the driveway. The tragedy of Flint is not a natural disaster. It is a betrayal. It is the story of a city built by General Motors that was abandoned by its creator. But the true unforgivable story is the water crisis. This was not an accident. It was a series of cold financial decisions. To save money, officials switched the city's water source to the toxic Flint River. The residents complained immediately. The water was brown, it smelled, it tasted like metal. They were told it was safe. They were lied to. For 18 months, the government denied the problem, as lead leached from the old pipes into the bodies of its citizens. A 2017 report from the Michigan Civil Rights Commission called it, unequivocally, a consequence of systemic racism. The permanent damage was not just to the health of a generation. It was the complete destruction of public trust. The price of a home in Flint does not reflect the value of brick and mortar. It reflects the market value of a promise, broken by the very people who were supposed to protect you. Number 8. McAllen, Texas. Suspiciously low, a fraction of the national average. McAllen is not haunted by a ghost, it is haunted by the present. This is the story of the psychological toll of living on a razor's edge. McAllen is the epicenter of the American border debate. It is a city living in a perpetual state of high tension. It is a place of walls, checkpoints, and a constant, low-level hum of political and social friction. The story of McAllen is the story of two worlds colliding, a unique, vibrant, bilingual culture that also exists in a permanent state of instability. The local news is the national news. The problems of the world are not on television. They are in the backyard. The low price of a home in McAllen is not a mystery. It is the discount you get for agreeing to live on a geopolitical fault line. It is the price you pay for stability. Number 7. Kansas City, Missouri. A $50,000 home on one side of the street and a $500,000 home on the other. The story of Kansas City is the story of a single line drawn on a map. That line is Troost Avenue. For decades, Troost was one of America's most infamous and explicit red lines. Redlining was the systemic racist practice where banks drew literal red lines around minority neighborhoods, refusing to lend money for mortgages or improvements. The archives of old lending maps show it clearly. West of Troost, investment flowed. Neighborhoods flourished. East of Troost, investment was starved. Neighborhoods decayed. This was not a market force, it was a decision. The high crime rates you see today are not the cause of the low prices. They are the symptom. They are the direct, predictable result of decades of forced poverty and engineered decay. The $50,000 homes east of Troost are not cheap. They are the physical evidence of a historical wound, deliberately inflicted, that has never been allowed to heal. Number 6. Greenville, Mississippi. Homes for less than a used jet ski. This is the heart of the Mississippi Delta, the birthplace of the blues. This land is haunted by music, by hardship, and by water. The defining tragedy of Greenville is the Great Mississippi Flood of 1927. This was a biblical catastrophe, a natural disaster of almost unimaginable scale. The levees broke. The city of Greenville was submerged under 10 feet of water for months. It was not just a flood, it was a social realignment. The disaster exposed the brutal racial caste system of the plantations and became the single greatest catalyst for the Great Migration, when millions of Black Americans fled the South for the North. They fled the water, but they also fled the oppression that the floodwaters revealed. The music born here, the blues, is the sound of that struggle. When you buy a cheap house in Greenville, you are not just buying property. You are buying a small piece of a great, tragic, and profound history. A history that the rest of the world has largely left behind. If those first 5 towns are the scars of our society, these next 5 are the personal mysteries, the whispers in the dark, the cold case files left open to time. Number 5. Perch Cheney, Michigan. Land is nearly free. The population is 0. Perch Cheney was once a thriving 19th century logging town. It had a hotel, a general store, and over 100 residents. Then it was simply wiped out. The history books are thin. They suggest the town was abandoned when the timber ran out. But the local legend tells a much darker story. It is the story of a witch who lived on the edge of town, whose child died during a brutal outbreak of diphtheria. The legend says in her grief she cursed the town and all its children. The disease ravaged the settlement and the survivors fled, never to return. This is what humans do. When a tragedy is too sudden, too vast, and too painful to be explained by science, we invent ghosts to carry the weight of our history. Today, nothing is left of Perch Cheney but a few crumbling foundations and a small, overgrown cemetery. No one lives there. The only things that remain are the trees and a warning whispered in a ghost story. Number 4. Moonville, Ohio. Land is cheap. The population is 0. Like Perch Cheney, the town of Moonville is gone. It was an isolated coal mining town, hidden deep in the woods. Its only connection to the world was the railroad. But the Moonville Tunnel remains, and it is considered one of the most haunted places in the country, haunted by 2 primary legends. The first is the Brakeman. The story, dating to the 1800s, tells of a railroad worker who was struck by the train and gruesomely decapitated. They say his lantern can still be seen, swinging in the dark as he searches for his lost head. The second is the Lavender Ghost. The legend speaks of a young woman, perhaps a passenger, who was also struck and killed on the tracks. Visitors to the tunnel today report an overwhelming sweet smell of lavender in the cold, damp air. Right before they see her apparition, the town itself is forgotten. It has been completely overshadowed by the violent, tragic stories of the railroad that was once its only lifeline. Number 3. Portlock, Alaska. Unclaimed land. Population 0. This is not a ghost town. This is a cold case. Portlock was a small, remote cannery village on the edge of the Kenai Peninsula. Sometime between 1949 and 1951, the entire town, mostly Aleut natives, fled. They abandoned their homes, their jobs, and their possessions. The post office shut down in 1951, and no one ever came back. Why? The archives tell stories of hunters and loggers who would walk into the woods and never be seen again, of bodies being found, torn apart, floating in the lagoon. The locals, hardened Alaskans, were terrified. They blamed a creature from their folklore, the Nantian, a large, hairy, Bigfoot-like beast that they believed was hunting them. They pleaded with the cannery owner to move them. Eventually, they gave up and simply left. Portlock is an unsolved mystery. The land is cheap because no one has ever been able to explain what happened there, and whatever it was that scared an entire town of hardened frontiersmen into leaving, it may very well still be there. Number 2. Goven, Washington. You can supposedly buy the entire town for the price of a used car. Population, approximately 3. The death of Goven was not slow. It was sudden and it was violent. The story begins on a single night in 1902. A respected local figure, Judge J.A. Lewis, and his wife Sarah were found in their home. They had been murdered in their beds. The weapon was an axe. The crime was brutal, personal, and it terrified the small community. But worse, it was never solved. In a town that small, an unsolved murder is a poison. Everyone becomes a suspect. Every neighbor looks at their friend with suspicion. That fear, that paranoia, it was the real murder weapon. It was the blow that killed the entire town. People moved away, one by one, until nothing was left but the silence of an unanswered 120-year-old question. The cheap property in Goven is not empty. It is filled with the weight of that silence. Number 1. Bula, Pennsylvania. Land that has, at times, sold for $1. This land is haunted by the most powerful ghost of all, a failed dream. Bula was not a mining town. It was not a logging camp. It was founded in the early 1800s by a group of Welsh spiritualists. It was meant to be a utopia, a paradise on earth, built on ideals of shared community and spiritual enlightenment. But utopias fail. The Pennsylvania winters were harsh. The farming was difficult. The isolation was extreme. The grand spiritual dream collapsed under the weight of simple, harsh reality. The founders grew old. They died, or they moved on. And all that is left of their paradise is their cemetery, now swallowed by the forest. The land is cheap because it is a graveyard, not just of people, but of an idea. It is the final, forgotten resting place of a failed heaven on earth. History is never buried. From the social collapse of Detroit, to the unsolved cold case of Goven, to the failed paradise of Bula. 10 towns, 10 tragedies. The price of real estate is not a number. It is a receipt for a tragedy. It tells you, in dollars and cents, the exact market value of an unsolved murder, the cost of a broken promise, the weight of a dream that failed. History is never truly buried. It just waits, patiently, for someone to come along and listen. After hearing these 10 stories, which town's past do you believe is more than just a local legend? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. These tragedies are carved into the American map. And if you think the Goven axe murders were dark, wait until you hear the story of the family that vanished from the woods of Bennington. Click the video on your screen right now for one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries.